On December 23rd, 705 AD, 30,000 people woke up with their faces intact and went to sleep without noses. Emperor Justinian II had returned from exile with revenge on his mind and a blade in his hand. His soldiers went door to door through Constantinople, dragging out everyone who'd supported his overthrow. Senators, merchants, priests, their wives, their teenage children. They were lined up in the Hippodrome where special tables had been set up, equipped with restraints and sharp bronze implements. Not death, that would have been merciful, just disfigurement that marked them forever as traitors. But Justinian was just warming up. The next day, Christmas Eve, he unveiled his masterpiece in the same arena. A bronze bull the size of an actual bull, its belly filled with kindling. The first victim, the patriarch who'd blessed his rival's coronation, was stripped naked and forced through a hatch in the bull's side. As the fire was lit beneath, the crowd heard something that would haunt Constantinople for generations. The bull began to sing. The dying man's screams were transformed through a system of pipes into a sound like a bull's bellow, turning human agony into entertainment. This was Byzantium, the empire that called itself the continuation of Rome but made Roman cruelty look like amateur hour. For 1,000 years, Byzantine emperors turned torture into art and human suffering into state policy. They didn't just kill their enemies, they collected eyes like trophies, turned screaming into music, and invented ways to destroy humans that wouldn't be matched until the 20th century. The singing menagerie. The bronze bull was just the beginning. By the 8th century, Constantinople's Hippodrome housed an entire orchestra of death, bronze animals designed to transform execution into performance art. Emperor Constantine V, nicknamed Copronymus, dung-named by his enemies, expanded the collection with a bronze elephant that could hold 3 victims, a bronze horse where victims were placed backwards to mock their failed rebellions, and most disturbingly, a bronze lion whose roar was actually the amplified screams of whoever was being cooked inside. The engineering was genuinely brilliant, which makes it infinitely worse. The pipes weren't random, they were carefully tuned to specific pitches. A Byzantine technical manual, the Mechanica, of Leo the mathematician, describes the acoustic principles. Longer pipes for lower tones, valves that could be adjusted to create different melodies. The victim's position inside affected the sound. Lying down produced mournful lows, standing created sharper screams. Executioners became conductors, adjusting fires and valves to create specific sounds for specific crimes. During the Nike riots of 532 AD, when 30,000 citizens died, Justinian III turned the aftermath into a symphony. Contemporary chronicler Procopius, who hated Justinian, wrote, "The tyrant was not content with simple death. 7 bronze beasts were heated simultaneously in the Hippodrome, each containing enemies of the state. The sounds they produced, some bellowing, some roaring, some trumpeting, created what observers called a hellish harmony. Children were made to watch so they would remember the price of rebellion." The bronze zoo served multiple purposes beyond execution. They were permanent installations, always visible, cold metal reminders of imperial power. On feast days, flowers would be placed in their mouths. On execution days, smoke would pour from those same mouths. Citizens passing through the Hippodrome could touch them, feel the metal that might one day contain them. The psychological warfare was as calculated as the acoustic engineering. The mechanics of agony. The actual process of death in these devices was studied with scientific precision. Byzantine physicians were required to observe executions and document exactly how death occurred. Their reports, preserved in the Imperial Library, make for horrific reading. Dr. Stephanus of Athens noted that victims in the bronze bull typically died in one of 3 ways: smoke inhalation, merciful, usually within minutes; steam burns to the lungs, agonizing, took hours; or actual roasting, could take days if the fire was kept low. The executioners developed techniques to control which death occurred. A hot, fast fire meant quick suffocation from smoke, A moderate fire with green wood produced steam that scalded from inside out. A low fire with dry wood created an oven effect. The choice depended on the crime and the emperor's mood. Traitors got the slow roast. Common thieves might get the quick smoke. Religious heretics, considered the worst criminals, got whatever took longest. But the true innovation was the breathing system. Early bronze bulls killed too quickly through suffocation, limiting the entertainment value. Byzantine engineers added breathing tubes that provided just enough air to keep victims conscious but not enough to ease suffering. These tubes ran through cold water baths, ensuring the air was cool enough not to burn lungs immediately, but carrying enough heated moisture to cause gradual internal scalding. Victims could survive up to 3 days this way, their screams growing weaker but never stopping. The metal itself was chosen carefully. Bronze was ideal because it conducted heat evenly, preventing hot spots that might grant quick death through organ failure. The interior was polished smooth. Rough surfaces would have allowed victims to injure themselves, potentially bleeding out too quickly. Some bulls had interior spikes positioned to prevent victims from finding comfortable positions, but not long enough to cause fatal wounds. Everything was designed to maximise duration. The mass productions. The worst use of the bronze menagerie came during the iconoclast period, 726 to 843 AD, when emperors who opposed religious icons used them against monks and icon supporters. Leo III reportedly executed 300 monks in bronze animals over his reign, turning it into a production line of death. Witnesses described a system where victims were processed in batches. 10 monks loaded into different animals, fires lit simultaneously. The next batch prepared while the first was still dying. Constantine V perfected the mass execution system. He had portable bronze animals created that could be transported to rebellious provinces. The arrival of the bronze menagerie in a city meant immediate submission or musical death. In 765 AD, he brought 12 bronze creatures to Ephesus and executed the entire monastery of St. Auxentius, 38 monks over 4 days, their screams echoing across the city as warning. The logistics were staggering. Each bronze animal required specific amounts of wood, trained operators, and maintenance. The imperial treasury records show budget lines for bronze creature maintenance, including repairs, the metal cracked from repeated heating, cleaning, human fat clogged the acoustic pipes, and even replacement. One bull reportedly melted after being used too frequently. This was industrialized torture, with supply chains, quality control, and efficiency metrics. Michael the Amorian, writing about his grandfather's execution, described the scene. They brought him to the Hippodrome at dawn. 6 bronze beasts stood ready, their mouths already smoking from preheating. The crowd had gathered with cushions and wine, treating it like chariot races. When they placed him in the bronze horse and sealed the door, I heard him call out one last time. Not screaming, but praying. Then the prayers became screams. Then the screams became music. The crowd applauded each tonal change. Act 2. The Blinding Empire. The Art of Darkness. Byzantium earned its nickname, the Empire of the Blind, through mathematical precision. While other civilizations killed traitors, Byzantines perfected targeted mutilation that destroyed lives while keeping victims alive as warnings. Blinding became so common that Constantinople had entire districts populated by the sightless. Guide dog breeders became a major profession, and Byzantine law developed 14 different categories of blindness based on method and completeness. The techniques were horrifyingly varied. The basic method involved heated bronze needles pushed through the pupils, quick, efficient, and relatively merciful. But for special enemies, creativity flourished. The golden needle technique used actual gold needles heated to specific temperatures that would destroy the optic nerve without damaging the eye's appearance, leaving victims with perfect-looking but useless eyes. The vinegar bath method involved forcing eyes open and dripping boiling vinegar until the corneas dissolved. The lime powder approach packed quicklime under eyelids, causing chemical burns that took days to fully destroy sight. Emperor Basil II's blinding of the Bulgarian army in 1014 AD remains history's largest mass blinding. After defeating Tsar Samuel's forces at Clydion, Basil had 15,000 prisoners. Rather than execute them, he ordered total blinding for 99 out of every 100 men, leaving 1 per 100 with a single eye to lead the others home. The operation took 3 weeks, with soldiers working in shifts using heated iron rods. Byzantine military manuals called this the merciful victory. Enemies were neutralised but not martyred. The psychological impact was calculated. When the blinded army reached Tsar Samuel, the sight of 15,000 eyeless soldiers stumbling through his capital caused him to have a heart attack and die within 2 days. Bulgaria surrendered without another battle. Basil had destroyed an entire nation with heated metal and medical precision, proving that systematic mutilation could be more effective than genocide. The political economy of blindness. Blinding served specific political functions that death couldn't achieve. Byzantine law stated that emperors must be physically perfect. A blind man couldn't rule. This made blinding the perfect tool for deposing rivals while avoiding the religious complications of regicide. Between 641 and 1204 AD, 17 emperors were overthrown through blinding rather than execution. The process became ritualized. When Emperor Constantine VI was deposed by his mother Irene in 797 AD, the blinding was performed in the Purple Chamber, where he'd been born, using the same bronze brazier that had warmed his birthroom. The symbolism was deliberate. Where eyes first opened, they would last close. He lived another 8 years, a broken reminder of Irene's power wandering the palace he once ruled. Some emperors turned self-blinding into strategy. Philippikos Bardanes, anticipating defeat, had his supporters partially blind him, damaging his sight enough to disqualify him from rule, but leaving enough vision to live comfortably. When his enemies arrived expecting to fully blind him, they found the job already done, denying them their symbolic victory. He lived peacefully for 20 more years, legally unable to threaten anyone's throne. The blinding industry employed thousands. Professional blinders travelled between cities with specialised tools. The Guild of Sympathetic Surgeons offered merciful blindings, using opium and precise techniques that minimised pain. Black market blinders sold reversible blindings, temporary vision loss using belladonna that could be blamed on failed execution attempts. Even victim support became commercialised. The Society of Divine Darkness provided guide dogs, taught echolocation techniques, and ran boarding houses for the recently blinded. The hierarchy of mutilation. Byzantines developed a complex system where different crimes warranted different mutilations. The Ekloga, a legal code from 741 AD, specified exact punishments: nose removal for adultery, tongue removal for blasphemy, hand removal for theft, castration for rape, and various combinations for complex crimes. A document forger might lose their writing hand and tongue, but keep their eyes to see what they'd lost. Emperor Leo VI refined the system further with his Basilica Code, creating subcategories within each mutilation. Nose removal could be total, to the bone, partial, leaving the septum, or cosmetic, just the tip. The choice depended on social class, severity of crime, and possibility of redemption. Nobles got cosmetic mutilations that could be hidden with golden prosthetics. Commoners got disfigurements that mark them permanently. The execution of these punishments became public theatre. The Mutilation Wednesdays in Constantinople's Forum of the Ox drew thousands of spectators. Skilled surgeons performed the operations on raised platforms, explaining each cut to the crowd. Betting pools formed around whether victims would faint. how much blood would flow, and who would scream loudest. The collected blood was sold to tanners for leather treatment, turning human suffering into commercial profit. One account from Benjamin of Tudela, a Jewish traveller in 1165 AD, describes the scene. In the great square they bring forth the condemned. Tables like those of butchers are arranged. The surgeons wear white aprons that become red. Each punishment is announced. This one loses eyes for seeing the emperor's concubine. That one loses tongue for speaking treason. The crowd cheers skillful cuts and boos clumsy ones. Children sit on fathers' shoulders to better view. Vendors sell honey cakes shaped like body parts. Act 3. Creative cruelty. The numerous forgotten. Beneath Constantinople's streets lay the Numera, a prison that redefined psychological torture. Unlike typical dungeons, the Numera specialised in oubliettes, vertical shafts just wide enough for a person to stand, but not sit or lie down. Prisoners were lowered by rope into these stone tubes, some 30 feet deep, where they existed in perpetual standing positions until death or madness, whichever came first. The genius was in the simplicity. No torture instruments needed, no executioners required, just gravity and time. The human body isn't designed to stand indefinitely. After days, legs swell with pooled blood. After weeks, joints lock and muscles atrophy. After months, bones actually begin to curve. Skeletal remains found in Numera oubliettes show spinal deformations that could only occur from prolonged vertical compression. Emperor Nikephoros I turned the Numera into an experiment in human endurance. He ordered different oubliettes filled to different depths with water, ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep. Prisoners had to stand in gradually rising water, fighting exhaustion and hypothermia. The lucky ones in shallow water lasted longest, sometimes surviving 6 months. Those in deeper water faced the constant choice between drowning and standing until their hearts gave out. The worst aspect was the forgetting. Prisoners in oubliettes weren't executed, they were erased. No trials, no sentences, just disappearance into vertical graves. Guards were rotated frequently to prevent them from remembering who was where. After Constantine VII's death in 959 AD, workers found 30 occupied oubliettes that had been forgotten for years. Some contained living humans who had survived on rainwater and insects, their minds completely gone, unable to remember their own names or crimes. The Garden of Stakes. Outside Constantinople's Golden Gate stretched the field known as the Stake Garden, where Byzantines perfected the ancient art of impalement into something worse. Unlike the simple vertical stakes used by Vlad the Impaler centuries later, Byzantine engineers created angled stakes that could keep victims alive for days through careful positioning that avoided vital organs. The stakes were graded by thickness and angle. Thin stakes killed quickly through internal bleeding. Thick stakes, properly oiled and inserted with medical precision, could support a living human for up to a week. The angle mattered. Too vertical, and death came from organ damage. Too horizontal, and the victim could shift position and die quickly. The perfect 43-degree angle, discovered through extensive practice, created maximum suffering with minimum lethality. Emperor Phocas, during his reign of terror, 602 to 610 AD, turned the Stake Garden into a forest. At its peak, over 400 stakes held victims in various stages of dying. He ordered them arranged by height to create aesthetic patterns visible from the city walls. Musicians were hired to play during mass impalements, their melodies timing the lowering of victims onto stakes. The garden had viewing platforms where citizens could rent seats to watch the slow deaths unfold over days. The maintenance was grotesque but methodical. Specialized workers called gardeners tended the impaled, providing water to extend suffering, adjusting positions to prevent quick death, and removing bodies only when fully deceased. They developed techniques to predict death times, taking bets on which victims would last longest. The Byzantine military manual, Strategikon, actually includes a chapter on impalement logistics, calculating wood requirements, stake angles, and worker shifts needed for mass impalements. The collectors. Some emperors moved beyond simple torture into collection. Michael III kept a private museum of preserved body parts from executed enemies, hands arranged by size, eyes sorted by colour, tongues displayed by eloquence of their former owners. He would give tours to visiting dignitaries, explaining each piece's provenance, like an art collector discussing paintings. Constantine V went further, keeping certain enemies alive, but systematically harvesting parts. The rebel general Artabasdos was kept in a special cell for 2 years, while pieces were periodically removed. Fingers, toes, ears, nose, genitals, all carefully timed to allow healing between amputations. The goal wasn't death, but complete deconstruction of a human while maintaining consciousness. Palace doctors were required to keep him alive, developing new techniques for preventing infection and shock. The practice became systematized under Leo IV, who established the Archive of Agony, a bureaucratic department that catalogued which punishments had been used on which criminals to avoid repetition. They maintained detailed records. Theodoros the usurper, eyes removed, heated bronze, nose removed, shears, tongue split, not removed, hands crushed, hammers, living. This allowed emperors to check what mutilations enemies had already suffered and plan new ones accordingly. The ultimate expression came with Emperor Theophilos, who created living art from his enemies. After defeating a rebellion in 837 AD, he had the rebel leaders surgically modified to resemble animals, ears cropped and shaped like dogs, noses flattened like pigs, teeth filed to points like wolves. They were kept in the palace zoo, fed from troughs, and displayed to visitors as examples of how rebellion transformed men into beasts. They lived for years this way, human consciousness trapped in intentionally dehumanized bodies. Why it worked. This systematic cruelty wasn't mindless sadism. It was calculated statecraft that helped Byzantium survive for over a millennium while surrounded by enemies. The spectacular punishments served as force multipliers. A small Byzantine army could control vast territories because populations knew that defeat meant not death but creative mutilation that could last generations. The psychological impact extended beyond immediate victims. Children who witnessed their parents' mutilations grew up psychologically broken, unable to rebel. Communities that saw neighbours return eyeless, noseless, or partially flayed became self-policing, turning in potential rebels before Byzantine authorities found them. The empire spent less on maintaining order than any comparable state because fear did the work of armies. Foreign enemies were particularly affected. Byzantine torture techniques were so feared that many armies simply refused to fight. The Bulgars, Arabs and Rus all have records of soldiers deserting rather than risk Byzantine capture. One Arab chronicler wrote, "Death in battle is paradise. Capture by the Byzantines is hell extended into life. Their emperors have made an art of keeping men alive while making them pray for death. The system also created internal stability through graduated horror. Minor criminals faced mere mutilation, making them grateful to avoid the bronze bulls. Major criminals faced the bulls, making death seem merciful, and the worst enemies faced the collections and experiments, making even the bulls seem quick. This hierarchy of horror meant everyone could imagine something worse, keeping even the partially punished loyal out of fear of escalation. The Byzantine Empire lasted from the 330 to 1453 AD, over 1,000 years of continuous rule. While Rome fell in centuries, Byzantium endured for a millennium, and this wasn't despite their cruelty, but because of it. They turned torture into technology, mutilation into methodology, and human suffering into state policy so effective that enemies surrendered rather than face capture. The bronze bulls are gone, melted down for church bells. The numerous oubliettes are filled with concrete. The state garden is now a parking lot. But archaeologists still find the bones, always the bones, twisted in shapes that shouldn't be possible, bearing marks of procedures barely believable. Testimony to an empire that discovered you could rule forever if you were willing to be worse than anyone could imagine. If you want more dark history that your teachers definitely didn't cover, hit subscribe and like.